Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, thank you for being here. Chairman Rogers and Chairman Cole and I came in the same year. We had, I think, a 5-vote majority on the Republican side that year. We passed a budget by 1 vote. We passed every appropriations bill under an open rule before September 30th. And at the end of the year, we passed the Medicare Part D. So a very productive Congress, and if you have the will to be productive, you can be. So I look forward to us continuing that history of being productive. It's too bad Mr. McGovern left. I was going to take occasion to agree with him on the concept of cluster munitions being delivered to Ukraine. It does bother me as well. Mr. Smith, I guess let me just ask you. So 13 months ago, Speaker Pelosi brought to the floor a Ukraine aid package that was hastily drawn together. Seemed important because of the suffering that was going on at the hands of the Russians, of Vladimir Putin in the country of Ukraine, and how viciously they had been attacked, and your concept of another country enforcing its own idea of what the borders of a country should be, ideas that we thought we'd all left behind in 1938 and 1939. And yet, I'll tell you what's been tough for me. The administration will not come and talk to us about what the strategy is in Ukraine. We were told in February of last year that the Russians were amassing on the border, and then we had another classified briefing where they said, oh, it's going to be over so quick, and Kiev will fall in 3 days. And then it didn't. And President Zelensky emerged as someone the people in his country could follow, and they fought very valiantly against the Russian aggressors. But we've gone from what we were told would be a very quick action and the Russians would win to a protracted war of attrition. And now we're talking about delivering cluster munitions into that country. So I think it's fair to say the equation has significantly changed. We didn't have another classified briefing until July of 2022. And then it was not Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken, ODNI, General Milley. It was the undersecretaries who came and talked to us at the end of July of last year. And then it was many, many months again before we had another briefing. I don't understand why we have not had an Oval Office address to the people of the United States explaining why our support and our action is necessary. So I'm not criticizing you, but may I just ask both of you, could you commit to helping me as a rank and file, humble backbencher in the United States House of Representatives to getting a meaningful classified briefing from the principals involved? We need to understand what the overall strategy is that is being pursued in the name of the United States of America right now. I cannot tell my constituents what that is because I honestly don't know. And for heaven's sakes, if it wasn't for General Jack Keane going on Fox News, I don't know that anyone would have articulated a strategy, but it hasn't come from the administration. And it needs to come from the administration.
Yeah, I don't really agree with that. First of all, let me just say the strategy has been clear from the start. And I don't think I've encountered a foreign policy that had a clear or straightforward strategy. And they've said over and over and over again. The president has addressed this on many occasions, as has Mr. Sullivan, as has Chairman Milley, as has the Secretary of Defense, in a variety of different forums. And the strategy is this. We need to do everything we can to help protect a sovereign, democratic Ukraine. And this is done. Ukraine needs to be a country, and they need to be sovereign and democratic. And number two, we cannot stumble into a direct conflict between NATO and Russia. That has been their strategy from the very start.
If I may reclaim my time for a moment, that is precisely my concern. That I mean, there are days where it doesn't seem like there is a coherent direction. The recent announcement that we're going to deliver cluster munitions to the battlefield, I mean, where did that come from?
Well, I can tell you where it came from, and I, I understand there's 535 members here, but the chairman has regularly had classified briefings from the DOD people who are coming in there. We've regularly had those conversations, and I can answer the cluster munitions question, and I've heard it answered by many, and I think Jake Sullivan summed it up very, very well. What is going on, and this has been, all over the news, not just on Fox, elsewhere, where they've talked about what the Ukrainians are trying to do is they're trying to retake their territory. Step one, they stopped the Russians. They actually retook some territory last summer, primarily in the east and north. Now it is focused on the south, Zaporizhia and Kherson. And I've seen all the charts and all the graphs in open source, and the president has talked about it as well. They want to retake that territory and push the Russians back. Problem is, Russians are dug in this time. They are dug in really solidly. It's elaborate as all the type of defenses that we faced on D-Day and elsewhere, and pushing through those things are hard. So what the administration has done for the last 6 to 8 months, trained and equipped the Ukrainians to put them in the best possible position to succeed in that counteroffensive. And that's what they're trying to do. Primarily, poke a hole and get back to the Sea of Azov so that you can cut off that land bridge and reclaim their country. There is a sovereign democratic Ukraine right now. There would be a much more sovereign democratic Ukraine if they had Zaporizhia, Kherson, and preferably Donetsk back. And they are trying to push through it. Let me finish. And it's a huge challenge, and we've been providing them with a large number of munitions. We are running low on those munitions. Now, I want to make one thing 100% clear. When I say we are running low, not the U.S., we are not giving the Ukrainians past the point that undermines our national security. So we're not running out. We're running low on munitions that we can provide them in order to push that counteroffensive. For that counteroffensive to succeed, they need munitions, and the only munitions we have in excess, in the hundreds of thousands, are the DPICMs, the cluster munitions. Cluster munitions, which, by the way, have a dud rate of just over 1% compared to the 30% dud rate that the Russians are landing down on civilian targets all across the country all the time. We are giving them those munitions, as Jake Sullivan explained very clearly just a couple of days ago. We're giving them those munitions so that they can continue to prosecute that counteroffensive and have a chance to be successful in taking back their country. And you can argue with that policy, certainly. I don't think it's fair to say that it's not clear. It may not succeed because it's really difficult.
And I'm going to differ with you. It has not been made clear. And then you have the president go on Fareed Zakaria yesterday and said, yeah, we're getting them cluster munitions because they ran out of everything else. That is not helpful when that type of statement is made by the President of the United States.
But isn't that fundamentally accurate? I mean, that's the point. We don't have other munitions to give them, so we're giving them these cluster munitions so that they can prosecute it. What's inaccurate about what the President said?
I don't, you tell me.
Nothing's inaccurate about it. It is precisely the situation that I just described and that we are facing. Do we wish that the Ukrainians would have just punched through and raced to the sea and the Russians would have headed back to Russia in a week or two? Sure, but that's just not the way war works. They're dug in and it's going to be hard. The determination we made, we have to help them.
Well, I appreciate your discussion here. Yeah. I would ask both of you, help us as rank and file members of the House of Representatives who are having to vote on these appropriations, these defense bills, help us get access to the same type of information that you are getting.
That's what I was just about to extend to you. We have a monthly meeting with the administration, classified, to talk about progress and plans forward. I welcome you to join those monthly meetings with those folks. And
well, I would very much appreciate taking you up on that, because it has been difficult. Again, we went from it'll be gone in 3 days to a war of attrition. And that's what our constituents see. Yeah. And maybe not in your part of the world, but in my part of the world, the decision to provide open-ended munitions, military support to Ukraine has been significantly unpopular in parts of the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that.
We won't defend our border, but we defend their border. It's the argument that is made.
Sure, it's not open-ended. Okay, to begin with, like I said, we are maintaining the stockpiles that we need to meet our national security needs, and we are not willing to get into a direct war with Russia. So it's not open-ended. It's within those
Well, and
constraints.
that's what underlies all of this, is we are, unlike the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, we are dealing with a nuclear power.
Yeah.
And it is a different equation on a lot of different levels. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, or the offer for the opportunity to have the briefings, but I would also say, I mean, the general body needs to have more information coming to us for the amount of money that has gone into this, to have had a total of 3 or 4 classified briefings, and only 2 with the principals, only 2 with General Austin, General Milley, Avril Hain, and Secretary Blinken. We've only had 2 such briefings, so there needs to be more. And if we're going to be supplying what you're asking, the Congress needs to be read into it. And, it gets to another problem that I encounter, and it's our fault for doing CRs and omnibus bills. Cabinet secretaries don't know where their money comes from anymore. When we used to do the regular appropriations process, they kind of got it, that they had to answer a phone call from even a humble backbencher like me. They had to respond when a member of Congress called. Now they don't, because they're going to get their money in an omnibus or a CR. So I actually hope we do a better job with that going forward, Mr. Chairman.
And just to end on a note of agreement, I completely agree with you on that last point. And that's why Mike and I do what we do on our bill. Right. We're not giving it up. We're going to have every member have their say in committee on the full floor so that we continue to be relevant on at least oversight of our defense policy. So it's really important. I agree with you.
Right.
So another point of agreement I have with you, Mr. Smith, is it is great to not have to go and ask Saudi Arabia. In fact, we were in that position 3 years ago when we were energy dominant. For some strange reason, this administration gave that away, and I'm aligned with you. I want us to get back to a point where we don't have to ask potential enemies in the Mideast and base our energy policy based on how they view us.
I'm sorry, but I just have to say 2 things about that. Number one, we were never in a position where what Saudi Arabia did with the oil supply didn't matter to us. Never. And number 2, as we sit here today, we are producing more oil and natural gas as a country than we ever have in history.
I will just say, in sitting in this very Rules Committee over on the minority side, the night that the Iranians thought it would be a good idea to attack the Saudi oil fields or Saudi refineries with drones, I was terribly concerned because I thought the price of oil was going to spike the next day. It didn't budge because of the significant amount of production that was going on in the United States. We have not run, I'm from Texas, we have not run out of oil and natural gas in Texas. There's plenty there if you will just allow us to produce it. We have had discussions in these NDAA talks before about the privatized military housing, and there were some problems with the maintenance, deferred maintenance on military housing. That didn't come up in your discussions today. Has that been taken care of?
There has been significant attention applied to that. I'm not aware of continuing problems with it, but it has been a problem in the past.
Again, it's something that requires our continued
Always.
Surveillance.
Always.
A lot of this housing stock is back from the middle 1990s, and with the ravages of time, it needs attention, and we don't want our service members being required to live in housing that is.
But I want you to understand, that's true of all military housing, not just the privatized. We just returned from the Asian Pacific, and we saw terrible circumstances in both Guam and Japan that are just indefensible, and we've got to get after that. And those were not privatized.
Well, I do encourage you to.
We're on it like white on rice.
It is refreshing. In 2015, when Barbara Lee and I brought an audit the Pentagon Amendment, we were vilified for having brought it up. I'm glad to see there's so much unanimity of opinion that, in fact, that is it's an idea whose time has come. I was going to offer an amendment. I didn't do it because I didn't think there was time to adequately discuss it. But I hope it's something, I want to put it on your radar screens for down the road. A apparently in an NDAA last year or the year before, there was an amendment accepted that prohibited a member of one of the service academies from delaying their service to be a part of a major league sports. And this was brought up to me by several constituents. There was an Air Force recruit, Paul Skeens, who left the Air Force Academy. I'm sure Steve Scalise thinks it's a good idea. He went to LSU. They won a world championship. He's now the #1 draft choice for the Major League Baseball. But what a missed opportunity for the positive marketing that this young man would have provided had he been allowed to continue in the Air Force Academy, delay his service for a few years while he played in the major leagues. I don't know if you've had any opportunity to think about that anymore, but I hope you will give some attention to that. We need to be careful. We need to be fair, and certainly the commitment that's made of a young man or woman going into the service academies is one that must be taken very, very seriously. But on the other hand, here's a potential for a good news story to come out of one of the academies is that, again, there's no reason that LSU gets all that glory. It could have belonged to the Air Force Academy. And I'm interested in your thoughts on that, but beyond that, I have no other statements.
Yeah, I mean, what we ran into is, I mean, the Senate feels very strongly, or at least the leadership of the Senate feels very strongly in the other direction, that to your last point, that you made that commitment, you keep that commitment. Now, we had, in last year's bill, we removed it, and we said, no, you've got to serve your 5 years. It was actually controversial because there was an athlete at the Army Academy that was, slated to be a draft pick, and it would have just, so we grandfathered it. We grandfathered anyone who was in the existing group now, but that only helps for a couple of years, and then you will have that problem. And I tend to agree with you. Like I said, we ran into opposition from the Senate that takes a harder line. It's like you serve, but I think what the military determined a couple of years ago, and actually Secretary of the Army McCarthy was the one who was overseeing this, and he got very passionate in talking to me about this, that like you said, this is a very positive thing for the military to have someone who's come through, who goes on and becomes president. And it doesn't happen very often.
Right.
We're talking about 2, 3, 4, maybe one a year if you're lucky, and usually not. So it's not worth it to make the change this way. And yeah, it's something we're going to need to work on, but we're going to have to get past the other body at this point to make that change.
All right, I just want to put it on your radar. Several alum have brought it up to me back home, and again, I'm sure Steve Scalise sees an upside for getting him to LSU, but he could have been an Air Force grad. Thank you both for your work on this. It's a significant effort. Don't tell Mr. McGovern that I agreed with him.
I agree.